Once again, I'd like to thank you for attending our May Noontime Knowledge, which is honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Our guest speaker today is Jennifer Gunji-Ballsrud, who is the director of Japan House. I will turn it over to her now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for attending today. And I thought what I would do is start out with just introducing you to Japan House and the concept of Japan House and why we even exist on this campus. We have a really long history on this campus. And actually, the Japan House started in one form or another in the 60s, if you can believe it. And this was all because of one individual, and his name was Professor Shozo Sato. And he came as a visiting artist in residence through the dance department and actually wanted to just see if he could share his arts and his talents here on this campus just for a year. But then he somewhat was beckoned to stay, and he fell in love with the campus. And if you can imagine, then he said that he was one of the only Asian faculty members within the School of Art and Design, of course, and within the college or within the School of Theater. And then really across the campus, there were very few Asians, and particularly very few Japanese. So for him to make that decision to stay was really remarkable back then. When he was asked to teach, he essentially said, "What do you really want me to teach?" At that time, he was teaching Kabuki theater. And they said, "Well, whatever you want to teach besides Kabuki theater." And he said, "Well, I have a master's degree essentially in black ink painting. I have a master's degree in black ink calligraphy. I have a master's degree in flower arranging. And then, of course, my Kabuki credentials and certifications, and then a master's degree in tea ceremony." And everyone was so thrilled to hear this that they said, "Why don't you teach all of them?" And that's exactly what he did. He started teaching a variety of Japanese art, traditional Japanese arts and culture classes. And what he loved to use the coined phrase of teaching Japanese culture in the middle of the cornfields, because back then it was literally like when he landed at Willard, he said that he came, somebody picked him up and drove him into campus, and all he saw was cornfields. And at that time, what was called Assembly Hall. He just thought, wow, there's also some sort of like alien structure over there, and just was kind of mesmerized by the landscape of this campus. Well, he was teaching all of these classes. They became wildly popular, and particularly the class that was most popular was that of tea ceremony. And what was interesting about this is, as you can see, I'm in a beautiful, beautiful setting. But when he was asked to teach tea, he didn't have a facility to teach tea. He was actually asked to teach tea ceremony at the School of Art and Design. And although that is my alma mater, and I have a fondness for that history, I can't imagine teaching tea ceremony in those classrooms where there's cinder block walls and hard floors and easels and lots of paint and fumes of smells of the paint fumes, etc. So he would go, maybe if he could get into the classroom a couple hours early with his assistant, and they would go and clean the floors in the classroom. They would move all the easels. They would push all the desks aside. They would bring goza, which is a form of a tatami mat, but in a lighter version. They would roll those out. He would bring all the tea equipment. He would put up screens. He would put up a scroll where he could, and he would boil water and prepare everything for the class. Well, after doing this for about a semester, he said, "No more. This is just too much work to get this done and to set up a serene and tranquil space within a painting studio, essentially." So what he did, and remember, this was the 1960s, he actually put a sign on his door the next semester that said, "Those of you who are enrolled in this tea class, please come to this address." And so these students came to this address, which was the address of his townhouse. And so he had transformed one of his second bedrooms in the townhouse into a tea room. And he spent all that winter doing that. And so the students went there, and he taught class there. And again, it became more and more popular, and there was a waiting list to get in, and all of these students were going to his townhouse. Well, of course, sooner or later, the administration is going to catch wind of this. And so they did. And the director had contacted upper administration saying, I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Maybe we should go and check this out and make sure that this is legitimate and appropriate, et cetera. And at that time, we had vice presidents instead of associate chancellors, assistant chancellors, and such. And at that time, it was Morton Weir. Morton Weir, who later became our chancellor, was a vice president. And he had seen Professor Sato perform kabuki at Cranach Center for Performing Arts, and then wanted to kind of engage more and understand a little bit more about this class. So he went there. And what he found and discovered were all of these students from all different disciplines, not just within the arts, but from business, from agriculture, from the sciences, and from the arts and education and on and on. Like there was almost a student representing every college across this campus there. And they were all sitting seiza like this and learning the Japanese way of tea, quietly, patiently, and eagerly. And as he listened to the philosophies that Sato Sensei was sharing, he was learning that it was not just about the tea ceremony, but it was about life. And some of the philosophies he was sharing was what you see behind me. And it says, wa, ke, se, jaku. And these are the 4 principles of tea. And it says harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. And these principles are hopefully something that you will witness today within our tea ceremony, but they are the foundations of how we practice and how we think about tea. We think about doing things in harmony with not only the other person that we're sharing this bowl of tea, but hopefully we have harmony with self, we have harmony in the environment, we have harmony within our community. And then how do you have a harmony? Well, you have to respect yourself first, and you have to respect others, and you have to respect the environment, and you have to respect the community. Well, how do you do that? With purity. Purity, not so much in the spiritual way, but purity more so in a genuine way. It is about sincerity. It is coming from a true and genuine spot in your heart, mind, and spirit so that you can share this respect so that harmony can exist. And if we can achieve those 3 principles, then ultimately we can all attain a level of tranquility. And that's what tea is all about. It is about reaching a sense of peace, serenity, tranquility in our minds, in our hearts, and our spirits, and through sharing it with another person. And what Morton Weir discovered was, as he listened more to these lectures, he was finding out that really tea and the 4 principles, wake, sei, jaku, harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, are really the 4 pillars of life. It is about all of life. We need to have harmony. We need to do that by having respect. It has to come from a pure space, because I think in the end, even without doing tea, it's about starving for a sense of tranquility and peace and understanding. And that's what tea is all about. Typically in a tea, and we do share tea on a very regular basis here at Japan House, but typically in a tea, you would also be part of the garden. And we are going to actually share with you a really short video of what it would be like to go through our gardens. And before I before I show you that video, I do want to state that after Professor Sato, just giving a little bit more history about how we got here, after Professor Sato had retired, another woman had taken over, and that woman was his assistant since the 60s also. That woman happens to be my mother, Professor Kumiko Gunji. And when he retired, the university had kind of taken the land that he was using, the property that he was using, and made it into the Alice Campbell Center. But she was still here teaching, and she wanted to continue this. So lo and behold, she went back to Morton Weir, and Morton Weir at that time then was assistant chancellor, associate chancellor, and he helped her really devise a strategy of how to move to the next step for Japan House. Essentially, he said, raise money. And so she did. You never challenge a small Japanese woman to raise money, because she'll do it. And so she did. She went to every friend that she had, family members, every organization that was related to between Japan and the US. She went to her tea school. She went to all of these different opportunities and foundations for grants and was able to raise the money that the university required her to raise, and then some. And so this particular Japan House that I'm hoping most of you have been to, at least through our gardens, is all because of donations and the generosity of so many individuals, not only in our community, but beyond. And we have been here now, this is our 25th year. So 2023 is a very auspicious year for Japan House. We're very pleased to have existed in this location for 25 years. And we continue to share the Japanese way of tea and many other classes to the University of Illinois in not only credit classes, but also in the form of a minor that we just started last fall, a Japanese aesthetics minor. And we also share many non-credit classes to that for the general public. But as I was mentioning, the gardens, I think most people will say, I've not been inside of Japan House, but I've been to the gardens. The gardens too were all a donation. Every shrub, every rock, every wooden structure, every bamboo structure, every tree, every plant that you see was donated by one individual, and his name is James Beyer. And he will be 96 this year, and he still comes to the gardens once a week to help volunteer and keep our gardens as pristine and as beautiful as possible. So when you're invited to a tea, the host will invite you, and then you will actually take a moment to walk through the tea garden. And what happens is when you come into the tea gardens, it's about letting go. You need to let go of all your baggage, let go of all the things that you have to accomplish that day, let go of work, let go of your stress, and just be connected to nature. And that's why these gardens are here. It's respite for all of us because we need it. And we need a time to be able to wind down and really decompress from the stresses of everyday life, disconnect from your phones, from the social media that we're inundated by, from your emails, from your Teams meetings, etc. All of that needs to go to the wayside just for a short period of time. And that's what these gardens are here for. So we'd like to help you kind of get prepared for our tea ceremony by taking a walk through our gardens by enjoying this short video. So it's my great honor to be able to serve Diana here a bowl of tea, but I hope that all of you enjoyed the garden walk, the virtual garden walk, and that you're fully engaged in what's going to happen in front of you on the screen so that you can really let go of your everyday worries just for the next 15 minutes.
To everyone who is unable to join us for tea today, please excuse me for having tea. Thank you for making tea. Please finish. So you can finish. We will be back shortly to answer questions. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed a moment of tranquility by not only walking through our gardens virtually, but by witnessing the Japanese way of tea. Diana and I try to do as authentically as possible. Often when we have groups come to do tea with us, we do what we call sekishu, which means a narration that happens during the tea. But today we really thought we wanted to share tea without any words, which is typically how tea is shared. So the idea or the profundity about tea is that you have a moment to share with another person, and hopefully what we're sharing is not, we don't have to be talking about anything. We don't have to touch that person. All we're doing is having a moment of tranquility together, and that our hearts are shared with one another through our actions and through the reciprocation of that genuine offering of tea to another person. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you feel as relaxed as I think Diana feels now after enjoying a bowl of tea. But we would be very, very happy to answer any questions that you might have about what you saw, or even about Japan House, or anything that might be on your mind.
Feel free to unmute, or if you have a question, type it in the chat, and we'll read them out.
Hi, I actually had a question. When would a ceremony like this be done, as opposed to just an everyday someone is coming to have tea with you?
That's a wonderful question. We get asked that many times. So tea ceremony, as you can see, there's a lot of preparation. I'm hoping that you could understand that aspect. There's a lot to do a tea. So it wouldn't be like, hey, come on over and let's do tea. It doesn't really happen that way, that we have to be very mindful and thoughtful about how we present tea and do tea and share tea. So typically it would be for more special occasions. Maybe somebody's getting a promotion, or we just did graduation teas here at Japan House. And even our camera person today is Caleb, who is our intern who just graduated. So we had a graduation tea for him and his mother. And but at the same time, it can be just because we love tea. Diana and I have been studying tea for many, many, many years. And sometimes it might just be about the full moon. Let's go outside and enjoy the full moon and have a bowl of tea and do tea ceremony outside. And there's a wonderful story about the former president, Toshiba. He had a tea room in his house. And that's not typical. I should really state that, but he was the president of Toshiba. So he had a tea room, and he would have breakfast with his family, and then he would go to that tea room and he would do a tea ceremony for himself. And that whole purpose was so that he could prepare to be a very mindful, strong-minded, gentle, respectful president for his company. And then upon returning home, before he would interact with his family, he would go to that tea room again and make another bowl of tea for himself. And this was the idea of, now I need to kind of change hats, so to speak, and become a mindful, kind, and gentle and respectful husband, grandfather, and father. And so there are some people who do tea for themselves every day so that they can get prepared for the day, or prepared to interact with people in such a manner.
We had one question from the chat. How large a group do you typically do tea ceremonies for?
So at Japan House, we're very fortunate. We have this room that you can see right now, which is comprised of 8 mats. So in Japan, prior to modernization, I would say, you would actually go and seek out an apartment, for instance, by the number of tatami mats they would have in the apartment. So they would say, oh, it's a 24 tatami mat apartment. But we have an 8 mat room. And then next to our room here, we have a 10 mat room. And we have dividing walls that are removable that we can take out. So we can actually seat probably 20 to 22 people fairly comfortably within the space and do tea for. We also have a different style of tea, which is a little bit more contemporary. And by what I mean by contemporary, it was developed in the late 1800s. And that particular style of tea is called Bude. And Bude is a table style tea. that was developed by the great tea master Gengensai. And he actually developed it because he knew that once Japan's doors were open to the West, if they were going to continue sharing the way of tea with not just Japanese people, but with Westerners, that they weren't comfortable or necessarily accustomed to sitting seiza on a tatami mat. So he developed table style tea. And we practice that style of tea here at Japan House, and we teach that style of tea at Japan House. And so when we do that style of tea, we can do upwards to 30 to 40 people within Japan House because we have a nice, large kind of open space to be able to do that. But the ideal, I would say, my personal liking for tea would be maybe 3 people, because you really can sense the intimacy and it can be really focused on those 3 individuals. And that to me is more the appropriate setting for tea, but we're absolutely prepared to do it for a larger group. Any other questions, curiosities?
What are some of the symbolic parts of the movements, etc., of the tea ceremony?
Oh, so many, so many, so many. There's so many meanings behind what we do. If I can just say it in general, the way of tea and the practice of how we do tea is all about doing things as beautifully and efficiently as possible. And so when I'm doing tea, hopefully you didn't feel like my hands were moving quickly or moving from one end of the space to the other, but it's very much so, even though it might not, natural might not be the top word that you would use, but it is naturally, my hand is here, so naturally it would move here. But in the beginning, everything that I was doing was about becoming more mindful. And so we would never bring in dirty equipment, but I was purifying everything in front of you. And this was a mechanism, this is a mechanism, or this is a practice that we do to slow down. Because if I could just walk in here and start whisking a bowl of tea for Diana, but aesthetically, not very pleasing, mindfully, not very calming. And so the idea of tea is, how do we slow down? And so that whole process becomes a process not only for the guest, but for the host, to slow down and to focus on what he or she is doing. And so when I was using my silk cloth here to purify the natsume or the tea caddy, it was as if that was my mind. And I was purifying my mind so I could be focused on the moment. And then when I did that for the chashaku or the teaspoon, it was, I'm purifying my body so that my body is fully present at this moment and not thinking about, I actually have a meeting with FNS at 1 o'clock. I'm not thinking about that during my tea ceremony. And so I need to be fully present, and we do that in those steps. Then after we serve tea, it becomes a lot more practical. Like everything, hopefully in your own home, when you make a meal, everything has its right place after you're done. So you need to clean everything up after you've prepared a meal. And that's what I did in the end. I did the reverse, and it has a more practical and functional meaning behind what I'm doing. There's also many small gestures that were done throughout the tea that represent things from martial arts, that represent things from actually dance, and represents things from Shintoism and Buddhism, but that kind of goes into a much more lengthy kind of conversation. But for the most part, I think that those aspects are the prominent aspects of significance. That's a great question, though.
Another question we got is, what type of tea is used?
So the type of tea that is used is a powdered green tea. It's called matcha. And so often when you go to a Japanese restaurant, you'll have green tea. They'll say, we're serving you green tea. That's an infusion of tea. And so just like any other tea bag or tea leaves that you might be consuming on a regular basis, matcha is quite different, because matcha are baby tea leaves that are hand-picked from the same bush or shrub that tea leaves are picked for steeping tea. But these are baby tea leaves that are grown under shade or reed, so that they kind of have to almost fight for the sunlight. And they become this bright, dynamic green color. And after they're hand-picked, they're washed, they're freeze-dried, and then they're ground, much like flour, how flour is made between two stones. And it's made into this beautiful light powder that has the consistency of powdered sugar. And this powder, we use about a teaspoon, roughly a teaspoon of powdered tea with 1/4 of a cup of water. And then as you saw, I was whisking that tea using a bamboo whisk it's one piece of bamboo that's cut into about 80 to 100 tines. And it combines the tea with the water and kind of creates a nice froth on top. So it's almost like a latte or kind of a cappuccino-like top, but it's just the combination of the whisking with that of the tea. So it's a little bit more viscous than that of a steeped green tea. So when they talk about tea, green tea being super healthy for you, and it's a superfood, they're really talking about matcha. The health properties and the health values behind matcha is extraordinary. And so if any of you are curious, first, we encourage you to come and participate in a tea here at Japan House. But second, if you're really interested in drinking good matcha, contact Japan House, because we do sell the matcha that we serve in our tea ceremonies, and it is really extraordinary matcha from Japan. Any other questions? Is the question that has anybody in the group ever been to Japan House? Is that the question? Oh, no.
Has anyone ever said that you're doing it wrong?
Oh, doing it wrong? Oh, all the time. My mother is my teacher. My mother is my teacher, and I've been learning under my mother since I was a child. And she likes to tell me that I need to study more all the time. But to become a tea master, I've been studying tea since, good grief, 1989. And I am still at I'm about level 10, 11, and there's 16 levels. So I still have a long ways to go. So I have to study hard and continue to learn more about tea.
For some quick context, this is one style of a little over 800 styles of doing tea ceremony in our school alone. So there's a lot to learn.
Yes, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to refine. Yes. So I don't know all 800.
So that was actually my question. Are there regional differences in Japan for, like, if you did the tea ceremony in Tokyo and then you did it in Nagasaki, would you notice differences between the different places?
It's not regional, it's by school. So depending upon what school you study under, there are slight differentiations, but the heart and the sentiment's the same. Everybody stems from one individual, and that individual's name is Senrikyu. And he was the one that developed these 4 principles, Wake, Seijaku, and also is the one who codified the way that we practice, the basis of the way we practice tea. And he actually had 3 sons that he gave land to start 3 different schools. And so we are under the school of Urasenke. And then there are 2 other schools that are under his lineage. But it's interesting to watch other people practice tea from different schools. It's all the same heart. It's all the same spirit. And in general, the same movements and structure. But then there'll be something that they'll do and we'll be like, oh, that's different. And I think what's really interesting is in some schools, they don't whisk the same way we whisk. They whisk it so that the tea is flat. Well, what we consider flat, because we're so enthusiastic about whisking so that we have this lovely froth. And so when you drink somebody else's tea from a different school that's not frothy like Urasenke's school, we're always like, this tastes different, or it's not the same. But we have to also be considerate that that's not how they learn, and considerate that that's their style. So that's what the differences would be. It's not so regional, but more so by school. Any other questions? I don't actually know where we are with time, so I'm always concerned.
Yeah, we just have a few minutes left. I was wondering, what was the little thing that you ate?
That's a great question too, because you're not here, so you don't get to participate in that way. So I apologize. we have, I don't know if you can see, Diana's trying to show it there. There is a small suite that looks like maybe a shard of cut glass, oops. But we try to use that seasonally. This is a particular suite called Chado, and it tries to reflect the seasons. So the colors are slightly purple and white to reflect iris season right now. And we are the only unit on this entire campus, maybe in the entire world, that has a office manager 50%, and then her other 50% is pastry chef. So we're very fortunate at Japan House to have Lisa Akins be our pastry chef / office manager, but she makes all these wonderful seasonal sweets because matcha has no sugar nor cream with it, and it's a little bit bitter. And so to offset that bitterness and to harmonize, we always serve a sweet prior. So when you saw when I said, please help yourself to your sweet, she ate her sweet. It was like maybe a minute before she was going to drink tea. So that sweet in her mouth kind of melts in her mouth, coats her mouth, so that when she drinks the tea, there's a nice harmony of sweetness and bitterness in her mouth. And there are thousands of different types of sweets. And my mother actually wrote a cookbook to make Japanese sweet making more accessible for people here. Because in Japan, you can just walk down the street and there'd be a sweet maker, or at the department store, you can get some wonderful sweets. But here, especially when they first started in the 60s, there was not even the ingredients here in Champaign-Urbana. So they started to evolve that, develop that, import ingredients. And then now that she's figured out ways, many, many moons later, there's much more accessibility to that of Japanese ingredients and such, but to make our sweets. And now Lisa Akins, as her student, has been making wonderful, wonderful sweets for us. So if you ever come to Japan House, you'll be able to eat some of Lisa's wonderful sweets and try our tea. I highly encourage it to all of you. If you haven't had a chance to come to Japan House, please try to come to Japan House. I was trying to get the group actually to come and be here at Japan House to be participatory in tea, but I do invite all of you to a tea sometime in the fall. Right now we have teas in through June, but they're all sold out and they're all full, but we will reopen our offerings for fall, and we invite all of you to come. I will say that it's my great pleasure to be able to present to you a little bit about Japan House's history and a little bit about the way of tea. And I thank you all very much for your attention, for your patience, and for watching us and being part of this Noontime Knowledge Hour. Thank you so much.